Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John O'Sullivan. I'm the president of the Danube Institute, and it's a great pleasure to me to welcome you here to our first session in our splendid new building. We're fortunate to have an occasion equal to the building, as it happens, because we have, as part of, this is one of our new regular programs, namely a discussion with policymakers. Obviously, the Danube Institute exists, among other educational purposes, to bring over to Hungary and to Budapest people of distinction in various fields, but in particular, of course, politics, which means, in the main, ministers and people in government in high positions, or people who examine government in high positions. On this occasion, our policymakers are experts in several fields, actually, as befits people in political life, but in particular, of course, in the fields of law, and in particular of law and migration. And therefore, I am going to give a brief introduction to the three participants, and then I'm going to quietly absent myself and go to the back of the hall, and like the rest of you, drink in the debate, argument, and wisdom that follows. Our distinguished guest from abroad is Senator Jeff Sessions. Senator Sessions is a four-term senator in the United States. He resigned to become Attorney General, and I would say he is one of the most consequential politicians in American government in the last 10 or 15 years. First, because as a senator, he played a major role in preventing the passage of two pieces of legislation on immigration that would have both increased migrant numbers into the United States very substantially and would have introduced an amnesty for illegal immigrants, the effect of which would almost certainly have been an incentive for other illegal immigrants to try to get into the United States. That was an astounding, that denial of those two bills, that blocking of them, was an astounding achievement. Because although the senator had strong popular support on his side among the voters, there was an almost unanimous establishment inspired to move the bills through. Both party leaderships, presidents of both parties, most of the newspaper editorialists, most of the TV and media stations, most of the cultural institutions in the United States were on the other side. But those bills were effectively blocked by argument, criticism, and evidence that Senator Sessions presented in debate after debate in the US Senate. I think it's fair to say that although he had most of his colleagues against him on the issue, they would concede that he won most of the arguments and presented much the best set of evidence against the bill. So it is possible to emerge with your profile and reputation enhanced by taking unpopular positions, but taking them well. Of course, the positions were unpopular with the politicians, not with the people. So it's a great pleasure to have Senator Sessions here to talk to us today on these topics. He is matched by a rising star, I'm sorry to embarrass you, Balázs, in Hungarian politics, who really has had a meteoric rise. When I first met him, he was a young lawyer in the Zasebeg Foundation. He went on to become a major figure in the migration policy unit. He then entered the government. He had some responsibility for electing the government, being involved in the successful electoral campaigns that have produced the last two Fidesz governments. And more recently, he has been a deputy minister in the Prime Minister's office. And coincidentally, Balázs, you've recently been given the same job as I was given in Britain by Margaret Thatcher. You're a special advisor to the Prime Minister. So congratulations on that score too. The debate is to be moderated and by my colleague, who I think is himself well equipped to ensure fair criticism and questioning of both our speakers, István, the Executive Director of the Danube Institute, who has experience both in government and in the political life outside government, and who has recently become, and I congratulate him on his first 3 issues, recently become the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Hungarian Conservative, a magazine which, as I say, in only 3 issues has established itself as something that one has to read to stay abreast of the debates, arguments and principles underlying politics in Hungary. So, having introduced the 3 speakers, I want to hand over to them and to say to you, many thanks for coming. This is our first event here in this distinguished new building. I hope you'll be coming back on future occasions. I hope you will be, alas, it has to be in another building, at our second discussion tomorrow with Senator Sessions. And in the meantime, so let me now say, well, not on with the dance, let joy be unconfined, but on with the debate.
Thank you, John, for your kind remarks. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to welcome you here in the name of the Danube Institute and, of course, the Batthyány Lajos Foundation as well. I would also like to send out a warm welcome to our 2 guests today, Senator Jeff Sessions, thank you for being here, and, of course, Balázs, thank you for being here. My first question would be perhaps a bit obvious. I think the 2015 migration crisis was kind of a turning point, certainly in Europe, but perhaps even in America. And my first question would really be to both of you, if you agree with me on this. Do you think 2015 was a turning point? I mean, if you look at asylum seekers, we didn't have that much asylum seekers coming here in Europe since the Second World War. So 1.3 million people turned up during 2015 at the doors of Europe seeking asylum. We never had that since the Second World War. That's a huge number of people. Of course, in America it was a bit different because I think you had a steady flow of legal migration basically since the beginning of the 2000s, about 1 million people each year, which is a huge amount of people. So coming back to 2015, do you see it as a kind of a new trend, something which opened people's eyes and a year which perhaps brought the issue of migration again into the public sphere? I would first ask kindly the Senator to reflect on it and if he thinks it was even a turning point in the United States as well or not.
Well, good. Is that working? I believe it is. Thank you very much. It's so great to be with you. I believe Hungary is, President Obama got caught saying about 20 times to 20 different countries, you're a great country, you fight above your weight. So Hungary is fighting above its weight, and I can say that no one else, I believe, is to that degree above their weight level. John O'Sullivan is a friend. I've admired him for many years. Melissa's a native of my home state of Alabama, and he served with Margaret Thatcher. He was editor of the premier conservative magazine in the world, William Buckley's National Review, after Mr. Buckley retired, and he's a world treasure, and I'm glad that you've engaged him here and using his full talents for sure. Well, 2015 I think was an important time, and people began to think a little bit more clearly. There were bitter battle in the United States around that time over an immigration bill, and the immigration bill would have granted immediate legal status, we called it amnesty, to millions, some maybe 11 million people, not maybe, probably at least 11 million people illegally in our country, with a guaranteed pathway to citizenship in 5 years if they didn't get in trouble, basically. And it promised to fix the flow of illegality into the United States. And to me, that was the biggest failure of the bill, in which we spent a great deal of time delineating, pointing out, and itemizing why the bill would not stop the future flow. In 1986, Ronald Reagan was talked into an amnesty bill. He later said it was probably his worst mistake. They promised enforcement. They legalized maybe a couple of million over time. And they promised they would stop illegal immigration in the future. Now we have 11 million in the country. And you do another amnesty, do you think that's going to mean we have fewer people? Won't they believe there will be an amnesty for me if I can break into the country unlawfully? I'll be on the list too. It encourages flow, which we'll need to get to, Minister. But what you've done is you've sent a message that your borders are not open. The United States is now sending a message that our borders are open. And what happens? More people come. One pollster said 1 billion people said they would go to the United States if they could. I was in Peru and I asked the ambassador, I saw something in his news clips that Peruvians, 60% said they would go to America if they could. He said, well, one just came out of Nicaragua and it said 70% would go to America if they could. Well, I mean, you got to have lawfulness at the border. So I would posit it. I'm off track here. But I want to say this, because I made my little notes this afternoon just to say what I deeply believe. Number one, we have nation states. The era of the nation state is not over. It cannot be over. It remains the best foundation for peace and prosperity and freedom in the world. And this globalist view that somehow nations no longer make a difference is bogus, as we in the United States say, as a $3 bill. That's what I would say. And nations have borders, right? Our laws, our Constitution does not apply in Mexico or Canada or Hungary or anywhere else. It's only within our borders do those laws apply. And that immigration is a policy to be set by the nation. And the nation has every right. In fact, the government's officials have a duty to ensure that the policies that are adopted serve the national interest, not the 60% of the people in Peru that would like to go to America's interest. Because you have to preserve your national interest, and you create laws. We got a book this thick, 600 pages, Immigration Nationality Act, and it's riddled with loopholes. Lawyers have figured out how to get around every provision, many of them, in it. Judges have rendered stupid rulings. Congress, because they're open borders, liberal, progressive Congress, won't allow the fixes to occur. And it's just been a nightmare creating that. But you should have laws, and then you have to enforce them. The rule of law requires, if you're a respected nation, you're a great nation, you set up your laws, and they have to be enforced. And if you don't have the respect of your own people or anybody else. Now, my goal for 2015, before when these debates started and continuing, was to get to the point where when people get into the United States and or try to get in the United States, they call back home to Mexico, Nicaragua's, El Salvador, Guatemala, and what do they say? You want them to say, the border is closed. If you pay a smuggler $5,000 to $10,000, and that's the going rate the Department of Homeland Security official said just a few days ago, and we've known that for some time. You pay them $5,000 or $10,000 to smuggle you into the country. You're going to pay them and you're not going to get in. Don't do it. Or they will call back home and say, this border is wide open. You just come in, turn yourself into the Border Patrol, and they'll take your name, and they'll ask you to let you go to Los Angeles. They'll even deport you to Los Angeles or Houston or Chicago, and then you'll be asked to come back to trial to hear your refugee status. And we have administrative judges who hear these claims of refugees, and all of them, whether they're Obama, Democrat or Republican appointees, 85% of the claims are denied. They don't qualify as refugees. They just are good people, many of them. Some of them are not good people, but they just want to think it's better life in America. They got a cousin, they got an uncle, somebody in the United States, and they want to go work in the United States instead of being in Guatemala. But the United States has an interest. So anyway, that's what, so we have in recent months seen every month an increase in illegal arrest at our border. In June, it was 178,000. That's about 2 million a year at that rate. And illegal arrested, and the consensus has always been that if everyone arrested, one gets through, and of those that get arrested, they're often released on bail, and if they've got children, they are immediately released on bail and provided housing. So what you've done with the fence and your consistent enforcement has sent the message all around the world that Hungary is not open to illegal immigration. And you've had a reduction in flow. And if you think of the mathematics of it, we've got more Border Patrol officers. President Trump built a wall and got more officers. A lot of good things happen. But if the numbers are going up mathematically, actually, this June in the United States is 5.7 times as many arrests as June of last year. Almost 6 times as many coming across the border illegally this June than last June. And so where does that put your police officers, your Border Patrol officers? They're hauling people around. They can't be at the border. It's just overwhelmed. And what we were on the path to do was to have a virtuous cycle where every time the numbers continue to drop, then you got more officers per illegal entrant, and you can be more effective in dealing with them. So I think that Hungary is set a good example for the world about how you should handle migration, and I salute you for it. And I can't tell you how painful it's been to me to watch the progress that was made in the last 4 years be eroded in the United States. It was hard. I mean, it was one obstacle after another, but progress was made, and now it's been tossed away.
Thank you, Senator. I think you made a really interesting point on the fact that sometimes it's enough to have the will for a country to try to stop illegal migration. Because I think here in Hungary, of course, we had the border friends, we had the transit zones, but I think what really mattered was the willingness of the state to say that we are stopping illegal migration, and I think that was done in the Trump administration as well. But I would like to give the floor to Balázs now, if he can also reflect on 2015 and perhaps some of the things the Senator said.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. First, I would like to express my gratitude toward the Batthyány Foundation and the Danube Institute. It's a wonderful place, what you have. And I'm very happy to see that, something is going on here from an intellectual perspective. And it's good to see that we have friends from all over the world. We have supporters. And thank you very much, Senator, for being so kind with us. Sometimes it's not easy because, as you mentioned, the media, NGO networks, or the crazy liberal progressive politicians are quite furious about Hungary, but you know, we Hungarians are used to it. We were fighting for our freedom, our interests for like 1,000 years, so the match is on. 2015. I think that was a game changer, at least here in Europe, and I think it was probably not in the United States, because that's a different country, different background, and different problems you have. But in Europe, I think politicians didn't realize that the world changed, and they were not prepared for 21st century. And from a legal perspective, it's very visible, because we have a legal structure on humanitarian law, which was created in 1951. We call it the Geneva Convention, and it was this whole international institution, legal institutional system was established back at that time, 1951. That was a completely different world order and world era. And the idea behind the Geneva Convention was to tell something about those people's rights and obligations who are flee from persecution because of ideological reasons from the communist countries toward the West. That was the idea behind the Geneva Convention. So how to deal with those people who are leaving the communist countries because of political persecution. We're not talking about these issues very often, but that's a fact. And you know, 21st century, it's very different. No Cold War anymore. The globalization is enormous. Media, telecommunication, the whole connectivity increased. And we also realized that not only in Central and South America, but Northern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East and Central Asia changed. Those areas, from very different, because of very different reasons, but all these areas became the areas of instability. So those regions are very unstable. That's 21st century reality. That wasn't the case during the Cold War period, because everybody was belonging to either the East or the West, and everybody had a godfather to be there and maintain stability in those regions. But right now there is not anymore a clear world order. There is not anymore a so-called international godfather for those countries and those territories. There is an ongoing geopolitical fight whether who is the leader of these kind of regions. So those regions became an areas of instability, and people don't want to live in unstable countries. There is the climate change, there are political and civilizational tensions, religious tensions. Some of the states are failed states from political or economical perspectives, and so on and so on. So more and more people, as you also mentioned, it's even the case in such countries as Peru. What we say, it's quite a good example. It's still a good example in South America. So it's still a quite stable country, but 60% of the population is willing to leave the country and go to the United States. And you mentioned the same number was 70% in Iraq. I was wondering only 70%. I don't know what the other 30% idea is.
I was unclear. I meant to say Nicaragua was supposedly 70%.
Oh, you mentioned
not
Nicaragua.
Iraq.
Sorry,
I don't know what it would be in Iraq.
Most probably in Iraq the number would be even higher. So, but the question is not who is willing to leave, but who is willing to stay. That's a very different attitude. And we're talking about millions and millions of people. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. And right now, according to our humanitarian legal structure, their only chance to start a new life, either in the United States or in Canada or in Europe, is to move on, give the money to the human smugglers, risk their life, walk across countries and continents, and try to enter the territory of the European Union illegally, and knock on the immigration office of Germany somewhere in Bavaria and apply for asylum there. And if they don't get the asylum, which is 80–90% that's the case, they don't get the asylum, but they still want to remain in the country illegally. That's their only chance. So those people, I had the chance, before I became a politician, as it was mentioned, I was embarrassed, but it was mentioned by John very precisely that I used to work for a migration think tank, and I had the opportunity to visit all these countries. I've been in Bangladesh, in Iraq, in Syria, in Nigeria, in various countries, and those are wonderful people who are there. And they are very logical people, they are rational people. So they know exactly that if they want to start a new life somewhere else in a more stable region, their only chance is to move on, and as I mentioned, the process, and to reach the territory of the European Union illegally. And I agree with you that communication is, I'm not saying it's everything, but it's very important. The signs we send to those people, and if the European Union is sending a sign, or the liberal progressive administration of the United States is sending a sign that we are welcoming all of you, or we are welcoming some of you, if you try to make it illegally, after years you will get amnesty. Then it's a clear sign that you should try it. You should try it and make it illegally to the United States or to the European Union. And that's obviously, from a political point of view, that's a dead end. That's a dead end. So that's what we try, and we also try to convince our European partners in 2015 that it's a suicide strategy. And from a moral point of view, it's also not acceptable, because those people who are coming, those are not the people who are in the biggest need. Because the poorest people, they don't move. They cannot move. So the poorest people who are in real need, they are still in Middle East, still in Sub-Saharan Africa, and still in Central Asia. They have no chance to make it. We are talking about middle-class people. And it's not part of our humanitarian obligation to take everybody, take hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, because then it would mean that we destroy our countries and our civilization, as it was. So our strategy since 2015 is that we create a system which is backed by, physical fence, physical barriers, a fence. It's backed by law enforcement, so it's backed by manpower. It's backed by financial support. And it also sends a very clear sign that you should not try to make it to enter the territory illegally of the European Union, or at least not through Hungary, because you will not make it. It's so simple. And it works. The numbers drop, but our political problem, is the European Union and the Schengen zone is inside open border zone. So the problem is that some of the European states were not on our side, obviously. They were very open border. They had very open border policies. Right now, not anymore. Their communication tone changed a bit. But Brussels and the legal structures in Brussels and the political willingness in Brussels is not there yet to protect the borders. So we are, and Brussels is not prepared for supporting the nation states to close and protect the borders of Europe for illegal migration. And since we are not able to be prepared for 21st century and prepared for this new world order, then Europe will suffer, because migration and massive migration right now, it's a geopolitical weapon. That's the reality. It's a geopolitical weapon which is used currently against Europe. It makes us weaker, not stronger, and that's a serious problem.
Thank you, Balázs. I think you made several really interesting points and mentioned some of the strategies I believe the progressives are using to facilitate illegal migration, and I think I would like to stay with those let's say, strategies which they use. One, I think, is clearly an effort to try to wash together legal and illegal migration. You mentioned the Geneva Convention in this regard. A second one, I think, is once these illegal migrants are actually here in Europe or in America, they have an effort to try to make these people citizens as soon as possible and basically give them voting rights as soon as possible. And the third one is to use NGOs to facilitate the movement of these illegal migrants and to help them in basically gaining asylum in these countries. So first I would like to stay with the issue of washing together legal and illegal migration. I think Hungary was always clear during the migration crisis that if we have refugees, people who are indeed in need, then they can come, they can go through the legal channels, and they will probably get asylum if they are really prosecuted. Hungary, of course, has a separate program for prosecuted Christians, for example. And I think in America it's the same, that the problem was really with illegal migration, with people who are basically using the loopholes and coming into the countries without the proper legal means. And one thing we talked about actually with the senator yesterday was a Netflix series called Orange is the New Black, which of course in the first series kind of tried to, I think, relativize crime and you know, kind of suggesting that anybody can be a criminal. But in the last season actually they were trying to suggest that what Trump was doing, because the last season was already during the Trump administration, and there was these really difficult scenes where illegal migrants who committed tax fraud or were robbing a shop or something like that, then got to detention sentence and were sent home. And the message of the series was that we should be really sorry for these persons, because they are poor people, despite being here illegally and doing crimes, they're still people like us, which is of course true, but I think it was kind of a really false message trying to suggest that somebody who is in a country illegally commits a crime, then we should still be sorry for that person and just tell that they can stay here and you have the same rights as people who are there legally and are not committing crimes. So it was really fascinating to me, and it's just as Netflix, it's basically the media, and a lot of politicians are not making proper differences between legal and illegal migration. And I first would kindly ask Balázs if he has any strategies perhaps which we can use against this washing together of legal and illegal migration, and if the Hungarian government perhaps has any proposals on this.
I think what you just described, it exists. The liberal strategy is to show through personal stories that they are good people and we should take them. But the problem with this strategy is that no one said that those people are bad. I agree with them that they are good people, but it's a different story from a country's perspective or from a social movement perspective, whether a country should take a huge group of people from different civilization and give them an opportunity to start a new life there or not. There's more advantage of it or more disadvantage of it. That should be a rational decision. And that's why the Hungarian government is saying that we have to be very clear that we have a humanitarian obligation. But the humanitarian obligation is not taking them, but try to help them in their home countries or in the neighboring countries where they are currently. That's what the Hungary Helps program is about. And there is also a political innovation in the Hungary Helps program that the humanitarian support programs and the international organizations, sometimes, according to our understanding, sometimes they are doing good things, but sometimes what they are doing is making things worse and not better. Because they try to use humanitarian supports to influence the countries and to have an impact on the local government. So they are negotiating with the local governments, and we don't know whether the money can go directly to the people who are in need, or it's just a money for a government to do either good things or bad things for the people. But we, cannot control that. And these international organizations became very powerful. There is an independent structure, there is an independent leadership, and they have their own goals. Sometimes their goals are very close to the country's goals, but sometimes the gap between their ideas and the strategies of the government, it's enormous, and it's a problem, because sometimes they are catalyzing the influx of the people and not trying to cool the situation down. So what the Hungary Helps program is saying, that we have to go to the different direction, and we have to find the local communities, and we shouldn't provide humanitarian aid through the governments, but through local communities, local churches, because those societies are many of them are tribal societies. So we should find local leaders and agree with them what you need for your community, what you need for your 5,000 people, 10,000 people, not more, but that small community. And they can be very precise. We would be happy to stay if we were ready to or have money for a new school, and then you finance their new school, and then 5,000 people will stay. That's a very complex and very hard job, but that's the only thing which works. If we support humanitarian aid programs or try to negotiate directly with the governments, it's also a rational position, but we have to be very precise that it is then not about the people who are in need, but about some geopolitical maneuvering, which is also acceptable, but then it's not about our moral obligation, it's about having impact on these regions. What you just mentioned, the differentiation between legal migration and illegal migration, the case is obviously there. We also differentiate, every country differentiate. But, and that was, I think, from an intellectual point of view, a very, not very high quality debate, even here in Hungary in 2015, 2016, whether we can use the word illegal on the people, because a human cannot be illegal. So instead of doing this, we should use the word irregular. And talking about irregular migration, I think it does not make sense to use the word, but if the liberals are happy with that, I'm also happy to use the word irregular migration, but factually it means the same. Those are the same people.
Undocumented in the United States.
Undocumented.
That's the politically correct phrase.
That's the compromise. That's the compromise, a politically correct compromise. So, but my point is that we have a system. We have right now humanitarian legal system, which, as I mentioned, it was created by the Geneva Convention, and through this lens, we should be able to decide person by person who is a refugee and who is an illegal migrant. And truth be told, it's impossible. Right now it's impossible. We are doing that. And Canada is doing that. So Sweden is doing that. So not only the conservative countries and governments are doing that, but the liberal countries and governments are doing that. But even Canada is saying that 90% of those who are applying for asylum, those are not refugees. There are some periods of time when the acceptance rate in Canada, in the liberal Canada, is only 10%. There are some periods of time when it goes higher. But truth be told, you know, differentiate between those people. Right now we're saying that the Syrians who are coming to Europe, they are more likely to be refugees than the Afghans. And those who are coming from Iran, they are less likely to be refugees than those who are coming from Iraq. And those who are coming from Nigeria, those are not refugees according to our understanding. I'm not saying I'm not talking about the Hungarian understanding, I'm talking about the general European understanding. I spent days and weeks in Nigeria, and I have to tell you that Nigeria is some parts of the Nigeria. Those are not nice areas. That's the hotel I was spending 3 days there. After 6 months, it was attacked by radical Islamist movements, and tourists and people were killed there. I spent 3 nights in that hotel. So it's not a nice area. But so we are also not honest in this legal structures. So that's why I'm desperately saying, and that's I think the position of the Hungarian government as well, that right now we are having a structure, we're trying to live with it, but that structure, legal structure, is outdated. It fits not for 21st century migration movements. So the solution would be to say we have zero tolerance on illegal migration, and refugee policy and humanitarian support should be a completely different track. And that track shouldn't be about letting people to move on and cross continents and cross countries and apply for asylum in our country, but somehow apply for asylum in their home countries, or apply for asylum in the neighboring countries, or apply for asylum through our humanitarian aid programs, and that's all. And we should provide and collect all our money and our ideas and everything, and bring it to that countries, and try to have them there. So it would be a completely paradigm shift. But as I see the West right now, it's not ready to take this paradigm shift.
Really complicated issue. Senator, would you like to make some remarks as well?
Well, I think those are good comments, and we had the problem with Syrian refugees. They had no records. There was violence in the streets, but people had moved around, but you could not know if they were a terrorist or not, whether they'd ever been arrested or had criminal records, and that's a difficulty. But in my way of thinking, Mexico is an advanced nation. It's not perfect. There may be places in Mexico where it's dangerous. There are places in the United States that are dangerous. As far as I'm concerned, and we should say, nobody in Mexico can establish refugee status. Mexico is a country that operates like Hungary and any other country, and they get 70 million people, and if they felt at risk in one area of the country, that doesn't mean they get to demand entry into Belgium. That's a big country. In the United States, if you felt unsafe in Chicago, well, you would go to the countryside somewhere. Move somewhere that you feel you are safe, not demand entry into Hungary. So this is all incorrect method of thinking. Now, I do believe that we've got a problem in Afghanistan. I can see it coming, and I hate it. And you know, there are people whose lives are at risk. But they did support United States and Hungary and Europe and our efforts in Afghanistan. And so there will be some legitimate refugee claims there, but it can't be that when the United States or NATO supports one side in a military or revolutionary context and they lose, that we then have to take everybody, everybody that was on our side. I mean, that's just not rational. I mean, nations have to make rational decisions, so we're going to do that. We admit, just to share with y'all briefly, we admit 1.1 million people a year to permanent legal residence in the United States, a green card. They, within 5 years, can get citizenship. Of course, all their children born in the United States, or if people enter the country illegally while pregnant, they get citizenship under current interpretation of law, although that's a little less clear than a lot of people think. Some people fly to resorts, wealthy people around the world, and have their babies in the United States, and they're citizens, and they fly back home. If they get in trouble at home or would like to come to the United States for some reason, the person's a citizen. And then they can bring their mom and daddy, too. So, I mean, this is how we're out of sync. We have 800,000 that come to the United States every year on work visas. It's 800,000 jobs taken by, foreign workers. And businesses say they can't find enough workers. Yet, even during the pandemic, they wanted to bring in more foreign workers when unemployment was through the roof. So it's just the business community, it's the nature of the corporate beast to lust for cheap labor and lots of it. That's what they want. They can deny it, but if you think these corporations are paying wages because they want to, why aren't they paying more people higher wages? They pay them as low as they can pay to get the quality of worker they want. It's a free market. And even the most global progressive CEOs, they think the same way. So I do think that we can take refugees. I think the 1.1 million is probably excessive, particularly in light of the massive 11 million illegal immigrants that are in the country already. Many of them are working. But that's what we do, and I'm willing to support that law. 1,000,001, okay, if that's the law, we're going to support it. We're going to do it. And we'll have to wrestle with how to handle the refugee status. This administration is dramatically increased. The administration gets to set the number of refugees that can be accepted every year. President Obama's numbers weren't exceedingly high. Candidate Hillary Clinton promised to double President Obama's numbers for refugees, which I think hurt her a little bit in the campaign. And now President Biden can raise the numbers by executive order. He's only required to consult with Congress. So it will be in his hand, and we will want to take some more people out of, I'm sure, out of Afghanistan. But there are limits.
Thank you. Staying a bit with the United States, and of course.
Just one comment on that. That's why, again, in connection with Afghanistan, there is a from a strategic point of view, there is an important point. We have to, because we can see immediately on our borders that the numbers are going up, and the people who are from Afghanistan are trying to make it, because those are not the people who were in Afghanistan when the United States left, but they were on on the road.
Oh, okay.
So they were in Turkey, they were in the Balkan countries, but right now they think that their chance to get the refugee status, it's bigger. So they have to make it right now because the international audience is more tolerant toward Afghanistan right now than it used to be. So their chance is bigger. So they try to make it. The numbers are going up. That's why we should again send a very clear sign that migration shouldn't be managed. That's what it was mentioned by Prime Minister Orbán. Migration shouldn't be managed. Again, the language, whether we manage migration or not. So it shouldn't be managed, it should be stopped. And that's the sign what we should send, because we were not brave enough, we Hungarian politicians, to say numbers. How many potential asylum seekers can arrive to our borders from Afghanistan? But the Interior Minister of Germany did this. And he said that it can be approximately between 500,000 and 5 million people. 5 million people. We had the
Was
huge...
that from during Syria or
From Afghanistan, because of the collapse of the country. So, and it's not impossible because the migration routes are there. So they are ready. So the operation on the migration route with all the smugglers, with all the different paths, it exists. So right now it's again a turning point, and we should change the tone of the communication. And it's quite sad that what comes from Brussels, it's very different, because Brazilian politicians starting to talk about again taking people, not only those who were, supporting actively our military efforts, but, as many as it is possible.
I would note that we did numbers in 2015, I believe it was, when the surge was from the Middle East. And we concluded that you could sustain 15 refugees in the Middle East for the price of one in the United States. It's a very expensive thing. And when they come as a refugee, they're given free health care, they're given food stamps, all the things that poor Americans get, they automatically are entitled to, on the theory that there may be years before they, create economic sustainability. And so also, I think we've learned that certain people don't assimilate as well. They don't adapt to the new environment as well as others. And I used to always say that when you survey your immigration policy, you should look to bring people who will be faithful, happy, productive, flourishing Americans. Not people who are going to go in an enclave like we're seeing in some of the European cities, who reject law, assert their own law, and create a lot of problems that the culture is finding it difficult to deal with. Donald Trump campaigned and fought for, without a lot of success, that we should have a merit-based system. So Canada has that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Canadian system, but you get more points if you speak English. Well, the whole world, a lot of people have learned English. A lot of you, I'm amazed how many people in Hungary speak such fluent English. But if you want to go and become a Canadian citizen, it's a show of good faith that you learn the language before you come. And if you got two people apply and one speaks the language, why shouldn't he get more points than the one who doesn't?
But in Nigeria, almost everybody speaks some English. Yeah. So then you can take 100 million people because they are English speakers.
Well, so if you set the number, and then you set what qualifications. You want English. If you got more education in Canada, you get more. If you got high skills in some area that Canada needs, you get more points. And you got a whole list of things. You don't have criminal records and that kind of thing. That's how they select. That's preferable to us, which is basically whoever gets in here illegally gets to stay, and if you get in legally, it's family-based. So your brothers get more points, and they may have dropped out of high school. You've got a valedictorian of his class in a Nicaraguan high school, and a brother who dropped out of high school and been arrested before. The brother gets in before the valedictorian who's learned English and wants to go to Harvard or something. I mean, it's really, I think a nation has a right to set a policy that advances its interest, since you can't accept everybody that applies.
Sure. Just one comment. I think that's also a huge psychological difference, because and we, you know, it's not politically correct to talk about these facts in international media, that those people, the majority of those people who are coming right now, at least in Europe, they are Muslims. And so they don't have any Christian civilizational heritage. They are coming from a very different civilization. And the problem with that those people who left, for example, Central Eastern Europe during the communist era, they were very, and went to the United States, for example, they were very open towards the values and ideas of the United States, because they have seen that the situation in their home country, from this perspective, is not good. They were disagreeing with the values and the ideas in the Central Eastern European communist region. But so it was quite, they were Christians with a Christian heritage, and it was quite easy for them to be integrated, and after a while, unfortunately, being assimilated and becoming a proud members of and proud citizens of the United States of America. But right now, those people who are coming, they are Muslims, they have a different civilizational background, and they have no problem with the values which are in rule in their societies. They do have problems with the living standards. So they have materialistic problems. They don't have any value-based problems with their sending countries. So they are proud Muslims. They don't want to be proud Christians. They want to remain proud Muslims. And meanwhile, they want to improve their living conditions. And that's the reason why these kind of migration waves are completely different. These waves have very different sociological consequences, because right now integration is an illusion. They will not integrate. They want to create parallel societies, and they want to live freely with good living conditions under their very separated institutional systems. And it's not only a brand new phenomenon. It was the case in the 70s, 80s, when the Turkish immigrants went up to Germany. The Germans made the decision, you know, they were just guest workers. The Germans' mindset was that, you know, they stay here for like 5 years and then they move back. And after that they changed the decisions, and they said that, okay, you should stay here and be a German citizen, and sooner or later you will become a German citizen. But it turned out that they have dual identity, at least. And they are still very proud citizens and of Turkey, and sometimes proud supporters of, for example, the Erdogan regime. Meanwhile, the German politics is it's sometimes not very friendly on the current Turkish political system. So among those Turkish origin Germans who were voting for the presidential election and the constitutional change elections in Turkey, a major population was supporting Erdogan than those who are living in Turkey. So meanwhile, the German politics is openly campaigning against Erdogan's regime. I don't want to comment on that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the fact, that they are openly campaigning, politically campaigning against Erdogan regime. The German citizens who have the right to vote because of their Turkish origin on the Turkish elections, they are more supportive toward Erdogan than those who are living in Turkey. So that's why I'm saying that from a sociological point of view, these kind of migration is completely different than we expected and we were prepared in the past.
I tend to agree with Balázs, but I would also make a point here, if we're talking about this topic, is that I think there's now a bigger problem, because there's an unwillingness from the state in most of the Western European countries and in America as well to basically try to assimilate or, let's say, integrate these people who are coming in. So previously it was evident that you have to learn the language, you have to keep our customs, you have to, keep our culture, and now that's disappearing. Now it's you can keep your own language, you can keep your own culture, and of course we should be ashamed of our own culture in the end. So
may I disagree with you?
of course.
Because
Not in Hungary, I'm saying.
But we Hungarians are freedom-loving people. So if somebody in Hungary a Hungarian wants to wear a burqa, then she can make it. I don't want to control her. If I don't want to have any problem, then we should not let those people in. But if they are in, they should do freely what they want to do. That's part of their religion, to wear a burqa. Who I am to tell them that you shouldn't do that? I think it's nonsense. And for I think for a Hungarian grassroots voter also, it's unacceptable. If she or he is here, then he or she can do whatever he or she wants. It shouldn't be the state's responsibility to control it, but we should be very cautious whether we take them or not. And that's why the Hungarian government right now is saying that the risk it's quite big, it's huge. The potential disadvantages of taking those people with the large group as a large group, the potential disadvantages are bigger than the potential advantages. I understand that in Western societies, and especially in Anglo-Saxon cultures, the everyday reality is different because those people are already there. And you cannot, you have to do something, and especially if you are on the right side of the political spectrum. So from a conservative central right-wing political point of view, these ideas are emerging, because that's the only solution you can have. But I'm very happy that we can say that we, Hungary, we are in a different situation. And I would recommend all the Hungarians a different pattern, not to let them in. Meanwhile, we are maintaining religious freedom and all kinds of freedom here inside our country.
Some good points, Balázs. I tend to agree. I would like to turn back a bit to America now. What we were talking about, the issue of trying to get more and more illegal migrants citizenship in America. You have certain policies, especially during the Obama administration, like DACA, for example. But for me, what is really concerning is the so-called sanctuary cities. There's more and more of them in America, and basically these cities are basically not following government regulations and not allowing government enforcement to go in those cities and deport illegal immigrants. So it's For me, it's kind of a strange situation where you have cities which are not complying with federal law, and it's surprising, but it's arriving here in Europe as well. So now we have certain, especially in the UK, certain cities who are trying to emulate that. For example, Glasgow and Swansea. So I have a real fear that this might appear here in Europe as well. But I would be interested in your views on this, Senator. And I think you were trying to do something about these sanctuary cities during the Trump administration. Could you please share with us?
Yes. So in the United States, law enforcement, 85% of law enforcement is state and local. And most of it by far is local. That means cities. Police chiefs, police departments are hired by, trained by, disciplined by the mayor and the city council. Well, then, of course, the big left-wing cities, they control the police department, and they direct the police department not to call the federal government, who has exclusive authority in immigration matters, and report that the person they apprehended for drug dealing is an illegal alien. Could keep saying illegal alien. So that's the deal. And so then the cities adopt these policies, and the FBI and the Border Patrol may have, in a city of 2 million like Budapest, 50, 100 agents, and then they have terrorism to investigate. They have bank frauds and computer frauds and all these high-profile interstate crimes, and they don't have time. So it's not even a federal crime to commit a rape or a robbery or in a city in the United States, unless it has some other jurisdictional nexus. But the point of which is these cities are run by progressive leftist individuals, and now they've gained a lot of prosecutors that are leftist too. Used to, the prosecutors were tough, but they're not anymore. And of course, why we got a lot of those, I don't know if it's a secret. Is it a secret? That there's some gentleman, international gentleman with billions of dollars, who is funding the races of prosecutors in the United States who won't prosecute the laws. 2 of them in Virginia, they're seeking to recall them before their term is out. And I think he has some Hungarian ancestry connection. But that's really what's happened. It was a decision somebody made who was anti-police and anti-law enforcement, that if we could start electing in these big cities left-wing prosecutors, they can't prosecute a case if the prosecutor won't prosecute. So that's a big part of what's happened. We've had a surge in crime, by the way, the likes of which we've never seen. Ronald Reagan named me a federal prosecutor in Alabama in 1981, and it took almost 40 years. And homicide rates in America dropped steadily by 50%, half as many homicides per capita. In New York, at one point they had 2,300 murders. It dropped about 5 years ago to under 300, from 2,300 to under 300. Nobody in 1991 in New York would have imagined homicides would be dropping that much. But actually, Rudy Giuliani was the one that said it. He'd been a leading prosecutor in the Department of Justice, and he comes back home to New York and imposes these policies. They learned how to police better, and crime went down. Now in New York, under the woke mayor and the failure to prosecute, I think homicides jumped over 40% in 1 year. Chicago had a 60-70% increase in 1 year. San Francisco is seeing a major 40-type%. California cities all are. And the police are being denigrated, things that have been upheld for them to do to make neighborhoods safer. are being undermined, and they are being refused the ability to do it. They are demoralized. They are afraid if they arrest somebody and the person will resist and they have to manhandle them and bring them down and put the cuffs on them, they'll be sued for brutality, and the mayor and the city won't back them up, and there'll be riots, and they'll be the ones that held out to be blamed. Yes, we got almost 1 million police officers in America, and some of them lose discipline, lose control, should never have been police officers, and they do things they shouldn't do, but that's a very small amount. And they are highly trained. And if they're not trained, it's the big city mayor's fault. They're the ones that are supposed to be training them. It's their police departments, for goodness sakes. So, but the result is that the 2 years before President Trump was elected, homicides jumped after basically 40 years of decline, 20% nationwide. Prison population was dropping substantially during this time because the left wants everybody out of prison. Then we dropped it a couple of years, a little bit. We stopped the surge upward when I became Attorney General, and the President said reduce crime, and that's what we did. But after the riots, the George Floyd riots and all of that terrible, unfortunate, tragic events, the big cities just collapsed. They turned on police with a vengeance, and they're seeing 30 and 40% increases in homicides. And the victims, of course, of those homicides are poor people, minorities, African Americans, Hispanic, far more than any other class of the citizens. So it's just a monumental, sad tragedy that's occurring. And if you see crime moving here, smart, professional policing can make a difference over time. We proved it.
I would like to agree on that. And, you know, for me, what's always surprising that, you know, cities like Seattle still vote for Democrats and still vote for Biden, even though they have these horrible situations in their cities. So it's just amazing, really. I'm not sure if you would like to comment on that, Balázs. Okay. Well, we're slowly running out of time, so I think I would like to have a last question, which would address the future. Balázs already talked a bit about Afghanistan, which I think is going to be a really interesting situation in the next, let's say, 1 year. But how do you see migration in the next, let's say, 5 years? Do you think there's going to be a serious increase? Is, let's say, 2021 or 2022 going to be a turning point again with a huge influx of migrants coming in? Or do you see things more brightly, perhaps? I would kindly ask Balázs to start the last question.
I'm quite pessimistic about what's going to happen in the world, and I'm quite optimistic what's going to happen in Hungary. So I think Hungary can be a very certain point in the uncertain world, because the world will definitely be a very uncertain place. We have no chance to stabilize those regions, to be told, frankly, among us, but that's the reality. And I'm not just talking about Afghanistan, but I'm talking about the whole Middle East. Look what is going on in Jordan. We have no chance to stabilize sub-Saharan Africa. The population rate is going up. The number of the population is going up so rapidly that, and it will have serious consequences in that societies, in that states. Again, let me use the Nigerian example. They have, in each and every year, 5 million people more than in the last year. 5 million people. We're talking about half Hungary, half of the population of Hungary, and they have that kind of plus in every year. which means that the Nigerian state should have the capability of following this change with infrastructure building, with schooling, with healthcare, and with all the benefits which should be provided by the state. Probably they can take it. Right now they have the oil. The oil prices they went again up. So the situation from a central government point of view in that country is much better than it was 1 year ago. But what happens if there is no more oil, or the world economy changes, or the oil prices are going down, and the state should not be financed by this resource? Then it will collapse. And if some of these countries are collapsing, then it will have a huge impact in the globalized world for Europe and for the whole Western civilization. At least we in Hungary understand this reality. Hungarian conservatives are a pragmatic type of people, so we don't focus on ideology, but rather than we focus on the interest of our country. I hope that we will not on our own, so it means that we will have alliances. V4 countries and Central European countries, I hope that they will understand this geopolitical reality as well, and we can unite our forces. Western Europe is in a different shape and different situation, because the Muslim communities are still there. So if you want to maintain democracy, then in some of the Western European countries, you cannot reach a governmental position with a very strong anti-immigration, pro-Christian policy, because the Muslim communities are there, 15% or 20% of the votes coming from that communities, and they would never support they would never support a political camp which goes against mass migration and supports Christian values. So that kind of votes will go for the left, and the strategy of the left will to maintain open border policies, even if it's a suicide strategy. So I think that the division between the East and West will be bigger. But I think that I hope that inside the European Union we will be able to coexist, which means that we don't want to convince them to follow our migration strategy, but also we don't want to be convinced by them or forced by them through Brusselian institutions. So if we are ready to realize that and in this era, the European Union probably will follow a different pattern. There will be one pattern for Central Eastern European countries, and there will be obviously a different pattern for Western European countries. We still can coexist and cooperate on other issues. But right now, the pressure on us from the Brussels bureaucrat side and from the liberals is still quite strong. They didn't realize that it can cause the decline of the European integration. And right now we, the conservatives, are on the supportive side of the idea of European cooperation and European integration, but it requires tolerance and freedom.
Thank you, and I very much hope you're right on Hungary. Lastly, Senator, if you would share our thoughts, your thoughts with us as well about the future, perhaps a bit talk about America, what we can expect in the midterm elections as well.
Well, most people are predicting that the Republican, the Conservative Party will achieve a majority in the House. So it's a small half-dozen seat majority out of 435 now, and they had some luck wins last time. The Senate's always a little harder, but I think the Senate could flip. It's 50-50 now. That would really limit some of the bad things happening. as to the question of immigration, there is a belief among the global elites. My staff gave me a poster with the words Masters of the Universe on it. I noticed one conservative site has a click on Master of the Universe section, but that was the phrase I used to describe these geniuses who have no interest or knowledge whatsoever about what it's like for a school to go 40% dual language within 3-4 years having to teach, how much that costs the system, the crime increases that have occurred, and you've seen even more so, I think, in Europe. All of these things are not impactful on some CEO sitting in some grand walled, gated community where he's protected and his family are. So I think that politically it might, and then of course it's an almost, I would say the Western world that's been blessed with freedom, technology, healthcare, prosperity, great housing, clean water, all the things, electricity at low rates, readily available. It's one of the most remarkable achievements, the most remarkable achievement. You jump on an airplane in Alabama and I fly here and I get to lay down and take a nap during the plane flight. I mean, what great is this? And so this, you have a duty to defend and protect it from things that weaken it. Governments owe their authority, their respect and their support to their people. People, not corporations, not special interests, not some vision of greater GDP because we brought in 10% more people and they drank 10% more Coca-Colas last year. I mean, this is not what we're talking about. So I think it's not immoral. That's the first thing. They basically accuse us of being immoral if we believe we should establish an immigration policy that serves the national interest and is rational. So what will happen? That's the question. Well, in this issue, which is really a good one for sovereignty, the issue of sovereignty, as opposed to the UN for us or, EU for you. What do they get to tell you to do? How much control? Do they get to tell you who you admit to your country? It's historically, that's always been the sovereign state's authority to decide who comes in their country. So I think you need to fight that battle. I think the UK's is important. So I believe we're at a crossroads, all I'm going to get to say. And I think those of you in this room need to understand that you're in a remarkable position. We're at a crossroads in the United States. Somebody said the era of the Christian parliamentary state is over and we're going into some new world. It does seem like that. And so the question is, what world are we going into? Is it going to be a revitalization of the historic values and governmental principles that produced the greatest civilization and benefits the world's ever known, and we share that all over the world to poor people, the shots for COVID? We didn't go to the moon for people who don't go to high school. These are things that this civilization produced that's benefited the entire world. Poverty is being reduced worldwide in their countries, not by just coming to the United States. So I think that I salute Hungary because you're asking these questions and you're not being intimidated. Now that's the deal. They are afraid. It's not that they oppose what Hungary is doing, in my opinion. I feel this in the United States. I'm going to tell you what I think. I think they are terrified that you are right and you will win the battle. And they want to intimidate you, attack you mercilessly and personally, and call you all kind of names to get you to shut up and let them run things like they want to run them. That is definitely what the media is doing in the United States. And they've demonized Donald Trump to a degree that's, while they're saying he's mean-spirited, and I've never seen anything more mean-spirited than the left-wing media in the United States. So none of us are perfect. We're all subject to being properly criticized. But I'm just saying to you, I think you ought to be proud of what you're doing, think deeply about it, and not worry if some master of the universe sitting in Paris or Bonn or someplace thinks you're provincial and not advanced and glorious like they are. And in the United States, like here, I suspect half of the American people make below median income, right? Median income, $60,000, which is a lot, I think, compared to the world. But there, half of America makes less than $60,000. Who's talking about their concerns? If you bring in more labor from abroad, just like you bring in more potatoes or more cotton or anything, more oil, the price falls. So our workers have been receiving 5%. They've been receiving for 20 years raises that are less than inflation. Donald Trump promised to reverse that, and he did. I wasn't sure he could do that. But in the last 3 years, wages increased more than inflation. President Biden bragged about his wages increased, but they're below the 5% inflation rate. All I'm just saying to you is these are our people. That's who we as Democrats believe in representing the people of our countries. And not some ideological vision, not some naive theory. How do you help our people survive and prosper and be happy and live in stable environments and follow their traditions as they choose to follow them? So I think we're at a crossroads. I don't know what the future will be. I don't think it's hopeless, though. I think that this whole crowd in the United States is terrified of Donald Trump because he got more Hispanic voters, he got more black voters, 16% more Hispanics and 12% more black voters. He got more working class union type voters that used to always vote Democrat, and he lost to college professors and the news media. So this is the majority, right? And if you got the majority, you govern. And I think it could happen in Europe. I don't know why it shouldn't. And you know, immigrants to the United States polled, more than one poll, repeatedly show that people who've immigrated and become citizens do not favor open borders. And they favor ending illegal immigration at the border. The great worker champion, Hugo Chavez, was famous for helping the farm workers. He opposed more immigration. He knew it would pull down the wages of his workers, make them less valuable. Anyway, so I think this whole thing out there is, the left is frightened. We're at a crisis in the country, and I like that Hungary is saying, you're not going to tell us what to do. We're going to think this through, and we're going to do what we think is best for Hungary, and we're going to urge, more than any other country, you're willing to stand up and urge other countries to reconsider what's happening and maybe join you in some of these things. So I think it's an exciting time. It's a dangerous time. Who knows what will happen? I hope we'll begin to return to the fabulous institutions and that we've had that have produced such great benefits for us and the whole world. And the whole world is prospering. And 150 years from now, a lot of these countries that are so poor today are certainly getting better every year now, and they'll continue to get better. And birth rates will probably reduce in some of these countries, as they always seem to have done, and we'll stabilize a growing, prosperous world, and it will be led by the kind of freedom and democratic values that we've been blessed to have. So thank you. It's great to be with the Institute. I'm so proud of what you're doing. You cannot, I've been in government. When you're a public official, you're so many demands on you. You don't have time to study all this stuff. I just hate to tell you, he probably did not, but he probably reads all kind of stuff. But I used to think I was going to read more, but you don't have time. People are coming in all the time. You get exhausted. You need think tanks and people who have good values that are researching and studying. And when an issue comes up, speak up, you know, and support or oppose the politicians and what they're proposing, and do it in a rational, honest way. And that's what John O'Sullivan says, that you got to be, you can win these arguments with the facts and truth and good arguments. And I hope that you'll keep up the fight. The whole future of Europe and the world may be at stake. We need you.
Thank you. Well, I would like to thank again our two speakers, Senator Sessions. Balázs, thank you for being with us today and sharing all your interesting thoughts with us. I would also like to thank our audience for being here with us. Please stay. We have some snacks and some drinks still for you, so I think it's worthwhile to be with us. And of course, I would like to invite you for our next event tomorrow, which will also feature Senator Sessions and some of our visiting fellows and researchers on a roundtable discussion about Afghanistan and the Biden administration. So thank you again. Hope to see you tomorrow. Have a nice evening.